Wisconsin Eye's 2014 election coverage is brought to you by the Wisconsin Hospital Association. For over 90 years, a valued voice for Wisconsin hospitals, supporting high-quality, high-value care in communities like yours.
Wisconsin Eye is at the Milwaukee Public Library talking to candidates in the 2014 elections. We're talking to Jonathan Brostoff of Milwaukee. He's a Democrat, and he's running a 19th Assembly District. Jonathan, welcome back to Wisconsin Eye.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me.
Programming note, Wisconsin Eye appreciates the support of the Wisconsin Hospital Association, which represents more than 139 hospitals and health systems, for making these candidate interviews possible. Jonathan, you're fresh off a primary win. You worked, everybody says you worked very hard. Let me ask you this. As a result of all the doors you did, all the 19th Assembly District, what's going to be your priorities then, assuming you're reelected? Assuming you're elected, excuse me.
Sure. Well, I did work very hard. I was putting in just about 16 hours nearly every single day for 228 days in a row. And the thing that I heard most of all was public education. And it's kind of fitting we're in a library, in a Carnegie library specifically today, because what did Dale Carnegie envision when he invested all those monies?
Free system of public libraries.
Yeah, and
nationally.
Exactly, and I think the essence of that, the nature, the spirit of it, is that everyone should, regardless of what socioeconomic background you have, regardless of what family you're born to or what country you came from, everyone should have access to that sort of information and towards growing their education. And it's even more interesting that we're in Wisconsin, which historically has had such an emphasis on public education, not just K through 12, but also the university system. And that's something we've been able to be incredibly proud of over our state's history, but now it's this very strong system, which we've been so proud of, is under attack. And that's what I heard over and over and over on the doors, and that's going to be a huge priority for me. And again, the essence of the building that we're in today, this idea that education should be accessible to people regardless of where they're coming from, is a great one, and it's an ideal that Wisconsin holds tight. But not just in Milwaukee, across the state, but certainly in the 19th District, that ideal is under attack, and that's something I'd like to focus on.
How does that translate into how are you going to push to help Milwaukee Public Schools, assuming you're elected on November 4?
Yeah, well, it's going to be incredibly challenging given the current makeup of the state, and I don't want to ever suggest something that I wouldn't be able to accomplish in my right mind and work on. And I think at this point, it appears that the powers that be not only are looking to not sunset this 25-year or so failed experiment, but they even
talking about vouchers, the choice program,
the voucher experiment.
Excuse me for interrupting.
Yeah, no, exactly. And this failed experiment is being pushed into. Now they're talking about other parts of Wisconsin, which, by the way, aren't clamoring for this. In fact, are, from what I've been hearing, very upset by going into their backyard because, I don't think they think it's going to scale down very well in some of these more rural areas. And on top of that, we see these increasing class sizes throughout MPS and less resources, and teachers being asked to do more and more with less and less. And I can make the case, but I think that the best thing we can do right now, outside of the legislation that we may or may not have the votes for, is helping to get the leverage that we'll need in order to enact more positive legislation for public education. So visionaries like Carnegie, in regard to access to public education anyway, can not have those visions threatened. And unfortunately, we've been experiencing that time and time again, budget after budget now with the current administration and the current makeup of the legislator. And it's an area I'd like to focus on, but it's not the only one. Okay. If it's okay, I'd like to talk about a few other issues.
Well, let me ask you about once more. Since the last one other issue. Since last time we talked pre-primary, the governor has asked the Senate and the Assembly to withdraw from the Common Core standards. Your reaction?
Well, I think it's short-sighted, and I think it's just playing politics instead of looking at the policy. The Common Core program, as far as the experts who I've spoken with in that area, is not perfect, and it's better than what we've had, but it's also taken a lot of time and a lot of resources to develop. And now to forget all that, start from scratch after teachers have been preparing for this, after that initial investment of resources and time has been made, I think it's just going to string a lot of teachers up without a lot of opportunities for them to do what's most important, which is teach the kids and have access and resources that they should be devoting towards that. So I think it's very unfortunate, but I think that's one of many efforts he's made, which I see more as posturing. I mean, it started, I think, with the rejection of public transit funds, hundreds of millions of dollars, which would have gone towards not only improved infrastructure within Milwaukee and also regionally, but jobs that we really could use right now, jobs that he promised us that he's not delivered on. And it's incredibly unfortunate, but you look from that towards, Badger Care and now this, and it's this cycle of behavior which is wildly damaging, but might play well in, let's say, a presidential run when you're trying to appeal to the extreme core of your base, or towards out-of-state billionaires like the Koch brothers who want to see specific legislation enacted or specific gestures being taken that don't necessarily have to do with what's best for your constituency and for your neighbors.
The Taxpayer Alliance is out with a new projection. If we continue to fund transportation at the 2013 levels over 10 years, there's a $2 billion deficit. Now, it goes back to an issue that you just raised, but how, if there is a deficit, how should it be made up?
Well, we need to look at where that deficit is being developed, and is it, there's two sides to it. One is that as far as my area is concerned, this little section of the state that is the 19th district and that I hope to represent, you have what I would argue is potentially an unsustainable transit system, and one that needs to be not only expanded to a regional system, but also one that needs a dedicated funding source as opposed to the current budgeting structure that the county is under. But aside from that, you need to look at how much dollars are being spent on highways and where those highways are being built, and what our priorities are. We're in a situation now where the rest of the country pretty much is developing these great transit systems, and in other areas that are populated similar to what Milwaukee and Wisconsin have. I just look to Minnesota, which has a very similar culture, very similar climate, and look at how they've bounced back economically. And usually the top indicator, of course, is your public education system, which again has been under attack as referenced earlier, but also public transit plays a vital role into that, and we need to seriously look at where our priorities are and where our governors and our state's priorities are in regard to where that money's going, because you can try and bring more dollars in, and that's important, but you also need to be looking at where those dollars are being spent and where they're being expanded. So I think those are the two areas that we need to look at when you're talking about where that deficit's coming from.
Doesn't sound like you're willing to consider raising the gas tax to the $75 vehicle fee.
I'm generally not in favor of what those would be categorized under as regressive taxes, meaning they don't take income into account, because it generally has a higher percentage of impact on people who are poor, and we've done a lot to suffer incredible amounts of harm upon the poor in our community and in our state already. As I said before, Badger Care, of course, and our public transit. So, I never want to go into negotiation tying my hands behind my back and saying I'm against all the options on the table, but generally speaking, my philosophy is regressive taxes should not be a first resort. But we also have to work within the context of the reality that we're given.
Right. American Hospital Association said Wisconsin has the second lowest Medicaid reimbursement rates. Is it time to raise those?
Absolutely, and we need to. There's a lot of reform that needs to be done, and that's one piece of it that's very important.
a big issue for the city of Milwaukee should there be a new Bucks Arena. Here's my question. Should any help, financial help, building that arena come through the state budget and taxpayers generally, statewide?
As a short Jewish man, it's in my DNA to love professional basketball. That's a fact, and I do love it. And I think that the Bucks are wonderful, and I'm very thrilled to go to every game I've ever gone to. That being said, I think that it's very likely this particular proposal is going to go through. I mean, we don't have it all in writing yet. We don't know exactly what it is, but the idea of having public dollars go to pay towards this. And I have to say, my background's working in homeless shelters, working in the community. I went to MPS schools, and I am incredibly, on the one hand, nauseous to think that we're going to spend that amount of dollars when we've taken so much from so many already that are not part of the arts and culture, but are part of more what I would call, services that we should be mandated morally to provide, including, of course, healthcare, but also cuts to our social service agencies, cuts to our public transit. So, is it likely to go through? Yes. I think that especially, as I said before, given the current iteration of the state's political makeup, it's very likely. But I just wish our community could get as excited about our, high school class sizes, our graduation rates, as they do about public basketball and other, other pieces of the puzzle. It's all important, but we need to take a serious and severe look at where our priorities are. And so it's again very likely going to happen, but I hope that it can be part of a much larger package that includes talk about our public education system and our public transit. And by the way, if we want the Bucks to thrive, we should talk about our public transit system. Not only can it help get access for people to get to and from work and also to and from the games, but it can also help in other ways, such as reducing drunk driving and horrible tragedies that are suffered upon Wisconsinites yearly because of those sorts of accidents. So I hope it can be part of a much larger conversation that includes public transit and public education.
In our pre-primary interview, you told me you support the legalizing the recreational use of marijuana.
Absolutely.
Do you think that played a big role in your primary victory, Jonathan?
No,
Okay.
I don't think so. First of all, I have to say it was an incredibly tough primary, and the reason it was tough is because there were three incredible other primary contenders that I was working with. They all generally had the same policy point of view on that, so it wasn't an area of contention between us. But again, I had a lot of great people to run against, and I think the district would be served well with different focuses by each one. But no, I don't think that played into it. I think, like I said, the work ethic that I exhibited, which took a lot out of me. I went down 23 pounds, for example, as we said before the interview. But I think that's the sort of representation that folks are looking for in this district, because they're so sick and tired of what's been happening statewide, and they want someone who's going to put the work into the state. And I hope I can be that voice, and I aim to do so. But I think the other thing to consider is that unfortunately. Well, I'll speak to your point quickly, which is one of the things, speaking of the legalization of marijuana, is an effort and initiative being pushed by the ACLU. And as a former Wisconsin ACLU board member, I'm very happy to say, the work they're doing makes me very proud. And I should give a quick shout out to Larry Dupuy, Karen Rodker, as well as the rest of the staff at the Wisconsin ACLU who are doing an amazing job. But that issue is one of, I would say, it's of grave importance in that community, but it's one of many very important issues they're working on. Marriage equality. I'm sure you've heard about the work they've done very recently, but sure. That's incredible, and I'm very thrilled. And actually, they just legalized out in Oregon, so I got to go to my brother's wedding pretty recently. But I'm thrilled with the work they're doing with that. Also, some other criminal justice reform, and on top of that, they continue to provide important services towards voter protection, especially in the face of all the attacks that have been suffered upon Wisconsinites recently. In my election, for example, not having polls open on the weekends was huge because of the densely populated and very active district that I am running for. So, yeah, I should say that topic gives me an opportunity to give a shout out to the ACLU of Wisconsin, and I absolutely want to do that for the great work that they're doing.
One other criminal justice issue quickly. Is it fair to say you don't support first offense drunken driving as a crime?
Correct.
Okay. And then finally, I want to give you a chance. You have a third-party candidate on November 4th. Do you want to highlight any differences with your opponent?
Well, I think actually we have much more similarities than we do differences. I've known Joe since college. We went to UWM together. He's a great guy, very accomplished in his own rights, and I have a lot of respect for him. I know firsthand now how hard it is to run for office. Policy-wise, there aren't too many differences that I'm aware of. But I do want to work within the context of the current system, and the reason why I'm running is because I think right now the biggest threat that we have is not one particular policy or another. It's that the Koch brothers are writing our legislation, and they're able to do so because they have a supermajority in Wisconsin, and it's very far off from the Wisconsin I grew up learning about, of socialist. We have a strong progressive history. We have fighting Bob LaFollette. We have Russ Feingold. This is very out of character for our state, and it's a very unique situation that, due to a lot of mitigating factors, all coming through at a particular time in history, we're now suffering through these horrible policies because of it. But I want to remove us from that danger, and I want to work towards that first and foremost, and I think that that's something I can bring to it, as well as, of course, my experience working in our community's homeless shelters, working with our legislators, working to actively reform and bring about more progressive candidates within the Democratic Party in Milwaukee and in the state in general. But he's a great guy, and I'm very honored to be running against him, and I wish the best for him, and I think this is one little step, but whoever is successful has a big role to fill in the state's history, and there's a lot of work to be done, and I hope to be in a position to do a lot of work.
Okay, thank you. Jonathan Brostoff of Milwaukee is a Democrat running in the 19th Assembly District. The election is November 4. Jonathan, thanks for talking to
Thank you very
Wisconsin
much, and thanks again for all the work you guys do. It's incredibly important, and thank you.
Thank you.